This week we're talking about infinitives. Infinitives are a unique verbal form. They are verbal nouns. So in the same way that a participle is a unique verb form, it's half verb, half adjective, infinitives are kind of like half verbs, half nouns. But that's more in function than in form. Participles, you'll remember, in form resemble nouns because they take noun endings, which is the same as the adjective endings. Infinitives only come in one form for each stem. So that's huge. That's really exciting. You don't have to learn a whole bunch of different conjugations, just one form per verb stem. An infinitive in English is like the verb to read, or to sit, or to run, or to play, or to express. It's the most basic form of a verb in English. Because it's not bound by time, it doesn't locate action in time, it just simply describes an action. There are two basic options for translating infinitives in Hebrew. To read, to sit, to eat, whatever, is one option. Another option is to translate it as what is in English called a gerund, which is a verbal noun, which is precisely what the infinitive is in Hebrew. So a gerund is an ing verb. So for instance, reading, in the sentence, reading is fun, reading as a verb, it's an action, so it's a verb, but it's functioning as the subject. It's a noun that's modified by fun. Reading is fun. Or I'm sure what all of you would write if you could write one sentence, studying Hebrew is life-giving, or something of that matter. Studying here is our gerund, our Hebrew infinitive. Studying Hebrew is fun, or is life-giving, or whatever. So those are the two options, either as an ing verb that doesn't function like a verb in the sentence, but functions more like a noun, or to something, to read, to eat, to sit. Another option within the to read would be a purpose clause, in order to. Now, actually, I should qualify that a little bit by saying that with infinitive constructs, there's two kinds of constructs. There's infinitive and absolute. I'm sorry, infinitive construct and infinitive absolute. Infinitive constructs, 9 times out of 10, have a preposition attached to them. And it is the preposition that determines what preposition is added to the infinitive. So in English, it's always to read. In Hebrew, it might not be to. If the preposition lamed is attached, then it will be to. Or if it's just the form without a preposition attached, it's generally going to be to. But if it's the preposition bait, for instance, then it'll be more like when or while. Or if it's a preposition kaf, it'll be more like as or when. And even the preposition mean can be added, and those are kind of confusing. It doesn't happen that often, but then it's more like from or beyond, even in some cases. So context and the way that the infinitive is formed will determine which way you go in translation. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. An infinitive is, in some ways, at least in terms of parsing, The infinitive is one of the simplest verb forms in Hebrew. It isn't bound by time, and so it doesn't have a specific aspect, really, although the aspect you would identify as infinitive. But there's no person, gender, or number. There is no inherent subject when you have an infinitive. Sometimes infinitives are given subjects by the context, and then sometimes there is no subject. But there's no person, gender, or number. So what's interesting about it, as I've alluded to, is that infinitives do not define certain actions in a specific location in time. Other verb forms, like the imperfect or the perfect, define the relationship between the action and time in a very specific way. It's either something that's about to happen, or it's something that has already happened, or it's something that is happening presently, right? But with infinitives, the relationship alluded to between the action and time is much more general. And it's not, the relationship is not defined in a specific kind of way. So therefore, infinitives are timeless. They are indefinite, or the relationship is undefined. It simply communicates the action, not the action in time. Okay, so I want to just illustrate for you some of the similarities and differences between infinitives and their two grammatical categories. So infinitives are like and unlike verbs in certain ways, and they're like and unlike nouns in certain ways. So first, infinitives are verbs in that they're like verbs in that every infinitive will be formed, like every other verb, from a three-letter root. Okay? That three-letter root will be expressed and animated through a very specific stem sign or vocal pattern. And they're also like verbs in that they communicate action of some sort, or perhaps a state of being. But verbs are infinitives are unlike verbs in that they don't have a person, gender, and number. Unlike other verbs, they don't have person, gender, and number, and they don't locate the actions in a specific kind of time. Over here, infinitives are like other nouns in that they can either be in the absolute or the construct state. So infinitives have state, like nouns do, either absolute or construct. Infinitives are also like other nouns in that when a suffix is attached to an infinitive, it's possessive rather than being the direct object. When a suffix is attached to a verb, it becomes the direct object of the verb. Not so with infinitives. It's possessive, just like with other nouns. But infinitives are unlike nouns in that you cannot have a definite article attached to an infinitive. You'll recall, perhaps from a previous week's video, that you can have a definite article attached to a participle, but you cannot have a definite article attached to an infinitive, either an infinitive construct or an infinitive absolute. Neither of them can take a definite article. And finally, infinitives are unlike nouns in that when you have an infinitive construct, it's not the same as a construct chain with respect to nouns. In construct chains, each of the preceding nouns that precede the very last noun in the construct chain are in a dependent relationship to that final noun. This, of this, of this, of this. That is not the case with the infinitive construct. The language of construct is more, in this sense, with the infinitive, is more describing its form than its function in a sentence. So That's just a general overview. In the next video, I'm going to give you much more specific examples of how the infinitives are formed and what they look like in each of the verb stems.